Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Roundup, where this time round we've got a potential launch date for Honda's highly anticipated new Retro, tweaks to Triumph's dirt bike, Kawasaki have a recall in the UK, there's an update on KTM sales figures, we've got an interesting development around one of the most grueling motorcycle rides possible, Aprilia debuts some mind-boggling new tech, LiveWire show off some new concepts, Honda are working on 2 new electrics as well, CFMOTO have got some interesting tech, then Norton apparently canned their electric project, and we'll round off with this incredible looking factory custom from BMW. So let's kick off with that Honda Retro, which is one of the bikes I'm most looking forward to this year. It's expected to be based upon the brilliant CB1000 Hornet platform, which has been a hot seller this year of course, offering litre inline-4 powered sporty naked performance at an exceptionally low price point. So the standard bike comes in around 9 grand, the SP model with the Brembo brakes, the Öhlins shock and the quick shifter as standard, that's just over 10. Thing is, the looks won't appeal to everybody though, it's definitely on that sort of modern naked side of the spectrum. And so perhaps this new CB1000F that we've seen as a concept again earlier this year in Japan will open up that lively riding experience to those who prefer the more traditional looks. Now this naked concept specifically references Freddie Spencer's AMA CB750F of the early 1980s, and I really do hope the production version looks anywhere near as good, but it also looks like they could be working on a half-faired version which we covered a couple of episodes back. Now at the time, we just had some renders from WeBike Japan, which I think were done by their in-house artist, but it looks like they were actually in the right ballpark because Visor Down have confirmed just this week that they've picked up on a press release from Honda Global, which pretty much guarantees this is going to be a production reality. You see there's this teaser pic, which is clearly a half-fed retro with the CB1000 as a basis, and in the text of said press release, they also say it'll have its own booth at the upcoming Suzuka 8 Hours Endurance race, which I believe is set to take part between the 1st and 3rd of August. So not long to wait at all, definitely something that looks like it'll be a very enticing prospect, and naturally as soon as we've got all the details, we'll cover it with all the details that you need to know, so do hit subscribe if you've not already and you want to keep up to date with this bike. Moving on, we've now got some updates to Triumph's TF250X motocross bike with lots of fairly subtle tweaks that seem to give it a bit more performance and also address some niggles from the first generation. Now firstly, there are new FIM and AMA race sound regulations, so the airbox has been redesigned along with the silencer, although they do say there's no performance sacrifice, and in fact with some of the ECU mapping tweaks they've made, you should get better power delivery and better throttle response. Then you've also got a new XLE clutch which they say can handle more torque and also gives improved durability. Suspension's been updated with better settings for more mid-stroke control, better balance overall and also improved stability through corners. And to finish it all off, it's got new decals which I do think look rather smart. It's a great looking bike and I'm not necessarily really into my dirt bikes. On top of that though, there are also a couple of little practical tweaks like the redesigned battery tray which they say makes it easier to access, and also the oil level sight glass which has been redesigned to make it easier to read. So it looks like Triumph are taking some customer feedback on board. I should also remind you there was a recall on this bike earlier this year which we covered on this show, in which they had a problem with the switchgear. If it got a bit of high pressure water, potentially from being jet hosed, or if it got a bit of brake fluid on it as well, it could crack, and that could lead to the bike starting up by itself, which I think we can all agree would be a bit alarming. So one assumes, I mean they haven't mentioned it in the press release, but yeah, I'd assume that's dealt with too. Speaking of recalls, we recently reported that there was one in the US for Kawasaki's ZX6R, which did affect a really significant number of bikes, and the problem specifically with this one was that the crankcase bolts were potentially over tightened, leading to damage to the main crankshaft bushing, which could cause the engine to seize, and I'm sure you can imagine that might cause you to crash. Well, just this week it turns out that this is an issue for bikes in the UK as well, as MCM report, although they haven't issued the recall so far in Europe. Now, apparently less than 1% of machines have been affected, so it is fairly rare, and they also say it's a relatively quick repair for the dealers, but customers affected in the UK have been written to, so if you've got a 2024 or 2025 ZX6R, it's probably worth keeping an eye out in the post. It's a don't ride until you've got it sorted recall as well, so if you do have one of those bikes and you don't hear in the post, probably worth checking in with your dealer. Meanwhile, KTM are trying to get things back on track after a torrid time over the past year or two, and this week they've announced their sales figures for the first half of 2025. Now, on the face of it, it sounds pretty impressive. Their press release states that they've sold over 100,000 bikes worldwide from January to June, but it is worth adding, that there's a big focus on shifting old stock as they built up this massive inventory of about 250,000 unsold machines. So actually, there are 50,000 bikes delivered to dealers in the same time period, but one assumes the other 50,000, they're really trying to get through that backlog. That's exactly why they offered some pretty tasty discounts earlier this year across their entire lineup. And also I spotted the other day, less than a week ago, that they've actually recently uploaded a video titled on their YouTube channel, Grand Touring Redefined 2024 KTM 1290 Super Duke GT. Now, I'm sure many of you will be aware that at the back end of last year at EICMA and at Motorcycle Live, we covered the new 2025 1390 Super Duke GT. But from the looks of things, it seems like they're still heavily promoting the previous year model in order to sell all those unsold bikes. And so if you were holding out for a 1390, perhaps expect a little bit of a wait until they properly launch that one in dealers. Now, before we get on to the next story, just a quick reminder that our awesome giveaway in collaboration with Chigee is still open. And so there's plenty of time to get your entries in, and also use their discount code if you fancy picking one up. Firstly, we're giving away one of their latest iOS systems, which gives you dash cams, blind spot warnings, CarPlay and Android Auto, a GPS tracker, as well as the option to fit some of their accessories like their TPMS system and an OBD adapter to display data straight from the bike on the Chigee screen. For me, it's a crazy amount of additional functionality that you can add to your bike in one neatly done product. But also, you can actually hook it up to some of Insta360's action cameras to control them from the screen. And so on top of the iOS 6, we're also giving away their latest Ace Pro 2, so you can record your rides in top-notch quality. Then, our partners at KAWASAKI, a dedicated motorcycle-specific navigation app, have also given us a year's free membership, and so you can use it through the Chigee system with the CarPlay to find the best possible roads, either if you're out on a tour or for mixing up your local routes. It's a heck of a package for one lucky winner, so the link is down in the description if you want to throw your name in the hat. But also, like I say, we've got a discount code down there if you don't fancy your chances of winning, and so you can get 20% off an IO5, or if you want the latest gen system, you still get 10% off with our code, so do check it out if you like the look of these. On top of that, we're in our last couple of days for our PANDO Moto competition, who make super stylish riding gear. And so if you want to win a top or jacket of your choice, a pair of riding jeans and a pair of gloves, then get your name in for that one too, and we'll be announcing the winner in the next few days. They've also got a discount code running as well, so do check it out. And it's a great selection of products if you want some sweet looking new riding gear. Now, just this week, I was lucky enough to head to Goodwood Festival of Speed, a fancy pants, mainly car event here in the UK, but they did have some very nice bikes on show as well. But one of the highlights for me was speaking to the Dakar legend Sam Sunderland, who's about to set off on one seriously long ride. In partnership with Triumph and Red Bull, he's hoping to set a new world record for the quickest round-the-world ride, with a target of 19 days from the previous record to beat. That's just over 1,000 miles a day, which of course won't leave a lot of time for sleep, so do check out that Goodwood video if you want to hear more about it from him. But I gotta point out, in the comments on that video, a lot of you have pointed out that the record could in fact already be beat. You see, Fortnite recently published a video about the Multistrada V4 rally, in which they teased that they potentially did it in 17 days. The whole trip will be released as a feature-length film in about 6 months' time, so I guess we'll have to potentially wait to get the full details on that, but definitely one to look out for, although I am still looking forward to seeing how Sam gets on in the next few weeks. Next up, we've got this report on MCN that Aprilia have launched in 2025 a bit of an industry first, with some super advanced rider aids that aim to predict what's coming in the next corner. Now, you're able to fit it to the RS V4 and Tuono V4, and the idea is to use GPS data along with the onboard sensors and a software algorithm to try and set up some of the rider aids like engine braking or traction control or wheelie control to be tailored automatically on the track mid-lap with no input from the rider in order to get the best possible performance and safety through the next turn. Basically what you do if you've got the GPS module installed is record the circuit on your outlap so that it learns where all the corners are, and then when you're back in the pits you can fire up their MIA app and you can go through it and tailor all of those rider aids for specific corners. Now, the example that MCN give is if there's a particularly damp part of the track, potentially covered by a bit of shade, and so you could dial up the traction control through that segment, but then of course bring it back down through the rest of the track to make sure you get the best possible drive. On top of that though, it can also use adaptive learning to analyze your riding style in order to adjust the rider aids to get the most out of them, and so it really does sound like a phenomenal bit of kit. I'd love to know from you though, is it totally unnecessary for your average track day rider, or would you take it in order to still lessen the chances of dropping your 20 grand RS V4 factory on a local track day? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Now, over at Visor Down, they've picked up on a couple of patents from Honda that show they're potentially working on electric motorcycles at the complete polar opposite ends of the biking spectrum. One, you see, would be an electric version of their Shine, which currently comes as a 100 or a 125, and it's a big seller in Asia. Now, this one would be pretty low spec and affordable, but could potentially sell in big numbers. And the patent shows 2 batteries which are removable for easier charging, and they've got an air gap down the middle to help with cooling. At the same time though, there's another patent from Honda that shows they're also possibly working on an electric Fireblade, which I'm guessing might be of more interest to more of you. And Visor Down point out that they do have form here, having won the now discontinued TT0 category 6 years in a row from 2014, having backed the Mugen Shinden race project. And apparently there are similarities between this patent drawing and that race bike, with a not dissimilar layout for the motor, transmission and batteries. In fact, there's a closer shot of the way they've packaged the motor, the swing arm and the rear suspension, all very tightly packed together, leaving plenty of space for the battery up front. So is this an electric you can get excited about? Let me know down below. Now, Harley recently hosted their massive homecoming event, which was unfortunately partially cancelled owing to some extreme weather conditions. But one thing that did catch my eye as an outcome of this event was the pictures of this pair of concept bikes that were shown by their electric brand, LiveWire. In terms of performance, they say on their Instagram that you're looking at around the equivalent of a 125. The top speed, they say, is around 53 miles per hour. The range, I guess, in terms of city riding, where you're doing a bit of stop-start, comes in at about 100 miles. But for me, it's the styling which looks pretty interesting, with one street version and then another more rugged looking trail version. Basically, it looks like an electric Honda Grom kind of vibe, but the trail one looks specifically good to me and like it could be quite a lot of fun. Meanwhile, CFMOTO are working on a more serious off-roader called the CFX, and Cycle World obtained some patent drawings this week which show off some of the more interesting details. You see, this one was first launched at EICMA last year, but this latest info shows a pair of Peltier coolers which they say can be used to either heat or cool the battery to keep it in the ideal temperature range for maximum performance, be that power delivery or charging times. The battery does appear to be liquid cooled, it's got a radiator shown in the drawings, but the idea of these extra coolers or heaters is that they can fine-tune the temperature of the system still further, and so perhaps this could lead to a significant improvement in range and charging time, which are some of the biggest problems when it comes to electric bikes. So lots of electric stuff in the works at the moment, but it seems like not everyone is on board. Take NORTON, for example, who it's just emerged, have canned their electric superbike project only a few years after taking a big hit of government funding. You see, in 2022, they got $8.5 million from the Advanced Propulsion Center to start on a project with producing an electric bike in mind, and they called it Project Zen, or Zero Emission Norton. Now, according to their CEO, Richard Arnold, well, they built a prototype and it had pretty awesome performance, but the reason for pulling the plug is that he believes the customer demand is simply not there for an electric superbike. It kind of makes me think of Triumph, who did something similar with a research project on their TE1. Having spoken to some of the guys at Triumph who've had a chance to ride it, they said it was a rocket ship as well. But again, you'd have thought they'd have at least been tempted to put it into production if they had an inkling that there was some demand in the market. But look, electric big bikes like the LiveWire, for example, have hardly been flying off the shelves. And in fact, LiveWire's financial results show consistent losses, and so perhaps no big surprises that neither of these brands are willing to start pushing into these areas. Anyway, the antidote could be a nitro-powered drag racing bike, and that's exactly what BMW have built with this recent factory custom, which is actually based upon their R1300R Naked. It's called the Titan, and perhaps it's slightly of more interest to me than it would usually be, because I've actually got an R1300R at the moment for review. But all the same, it's got to be said, it's one heck of a cool looking bike, especially when you consider the starting point, which is a relatively chilled out roadster. The general idea was to take the R1300R and turn it into a sprint racer. With a nitrous boost system, you can see the can between the exhausts at the back, and that's actually a full titanium Akropovich custom system, carbon bodywork to keep the weight down, a lengthened swing arm potentially to keep the front end down, and also this very stretched out riding position owing to some super set back foot pegs. Not realistically one that you'd want to ride on the road, but still impressive to see this transformation of a relatively chilled out bike into something that looks like an absolute weapon. As always, I'd love to know what you think of this week's stories though, so do let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to see all of our content since the last news roundup, then I'll put a playlist on the screen now so you can check them out in case you missed them. We've got a first ride of the BMW F900XR, a first ride of the new Ducati X Diavel, and also that walk around of the best bikes at Goodwood Festival of Speed. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.